All right, well, let's give this a try here. So, trying out some new technology here. I've already ran into a couple issues here, so if you're struggling to find this, I apologize. It is live on the website, ashlerre.com/office. And it looks like we're also live on YouTube and also live on Facebook. Although basically the events that I was trying to create to actually schedule these things are somehow off in their own individual world. So we'll get this figured out over the next few sessions, I promise. And we will be recording this and releasing it as a follow-up in case you missed this. So apologize. It's new technology. So my background's in tech. I can never just stream off of a phone. I always have to try to set it up to reach as many people as possible. Funny enough, I had this multi-streaming thing set up like 5 years ago, before it even really took off. And what I've kind of learned about myself is I'm a little too early a lot of times, because a lot of people at that point in time weren't really sure about streaming or all that stuff. It was technically before the pandemic. Anyway, I know it's probably a little bit too much of the sausage getting made for you there. But all right, so we also have a multi-chat set up. So I should be able to see your comments. To be 100% honest, it's not very clear where those will show up. So I'm also monitoring YouTube and Facebook channels. Although, like I said, they're not in the expected positions. So if by some chance I do not get to your question, feel free to shoot me an email or text or just leave a comment, and I promise I will follow up with you after this session. So again, so this is office hours. This is pretty much just me hanging out, sharing a little bit of knowledge with you. If you have some questions about the real estate market, or maybe you're thinking of buying or selling a home, maybe you have some questions you hadn't felt comfortable asking in a public forum, or maybe you just don't know a real estate agent. I'm the first person that's ever showed up in your feed as a real estate agent. Now's your chance to get your questions answered. So we were going to talk a little bit about, I figured we would do a little shindig on, excuse me, on, what is it? Capital gains taxes. So capital gains taxes, as you know, or may not know, basically anytime you sell a asset, that can be a stock, it can be a house, anything like that, you do have to present a claim to the IRS for whatever that profit is. Obviously, if you lose money, that kind of changes the calculation a little bit. But capital gains taxes, in the sense of a home sale, usually works out something like this. So let's say you bought a house back in 2015 for $200,000, and you sold it this year for $500,000. So your capital gains tax would be paid on whatever the profit or difference between what you paid for it and what you sold it for. So if you bought it for $200,000 and sold it for $500,000, there's $300,000 worth of profit there, which has to be declared to the IRS for income. The good news is that there are exemptions. So the exemption primarily requires you to have owned the property for at least 2 years, You also have to have lived in that property as your primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years. So you can have moved out of the house. It doesn't have to be your primary residence now. If you've owned it for the last 5 years and you lived in it for 2 years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, then you would qualify for the capital gains exemption. Now, the capital gains exemption does depend on if you are married or not, and I just want to make sure I have the right information here. Exemptions, house sale. So, if you file single, then the capital gains exemption is up to $250,000 of the profit from the sale of your house. If you are married, that exemption does climb to $500,000. So in most cases, so for example, I sold a house I bought a house in 2013, and I sold that house in 2022. That is nearly perfect timing from the lower end of the market to the peak of the market. And I was still well under that capital gains exemption, so didn't have to worry about any capital gains on that. Now, the question naturally arises, what if I haven't owned the house for 2 years? And that is when things get into the weeds a little bit. There is a calculation to figure out, so you can get a partial exemption. So you have to have 2 years to get the 100% exemption, or not 100% exemption. You have to have 2 years to get that $250,000 or $500,000 exemption. If you have not owned the house for 2 years, then there is a calculation that gets done to arrive at how much capital gains tax you will be liable for. And again, remember, it's not the sale of the house. It's not the total purchase price. It is whatever your profit has been, your gain has been since you originally purchased it. Now, if you're selling a rental property or income property, something like that, commercial property, that does not qualify for the capital gains exemption. If you need specific recommendations or advice on what your actual tax liability is, I am not a tax professional, so if you need specific numbers, I would definitely tell you to speak to not a real estate professional. I am the real estate professional. I would highly recommend you speaking with a tax accountant or tax attorney who can advise you specifically on how all the nuts and bolts of that stuff works. But overall, the good news is that there is a capital gains exemption, and you more than likely qualify as long as it has been your primary residence. There's some other rules, like you can't have claimed that exemption within X number of years and blah, 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 blah. Funny enough, that is actually, so a lot of title companies, whenever you close, they actually have a questionnaire that you go through so they can figure out basically what the situation looks like there. So that's the capital gains exemption. Other than that, I am looking at the dashboard here. It doesn't seem like there's I don't see any questions or anything at this point in time. So I'm just gonna start riffing. We are riffing. Yeah. So actually, you know what? I have some other stuff because I do have a backlog of questions here that I can kind of bounce off of. Because again, this is office hours, so if there's no active questions or anything like that from the viewers of this, then I basically use it to to get some work done and answer some questions. So in this case, I'm actually going to go to ashler.com. So I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share here. So this is our website, ashlerre.com. A few cool things here. So you can see that we have Tampa Homes by Neighborhoods. So if you're looking for a particular neighborhood, you can look at you can restrict it down to only looking at homes in that neighborhood. We are currently putting together schools. So if you want to find only houses within a specific school district. We will be releasing that within the next, well, Tampa is going to be released within the next 3 weeks here. But, Dayton and Ohio, that's not quite as far along. So you can see that here. So we have Tampa Bay Homes by School. So there should be some information there. Market trends here. So this is going to be for your historic market statistics for Tampa Bay and Ohio. Some links over here to some fun stuff. What I really want to get to here is the real estate questions answered. So, all right. So basically, I'm just going to try to find some interesting question in here. So basically, these are just questions that people have asked me that I have responded to over the many years. So there is a ton of information in here. Still working on kind of fine-tuning the layout of this. It's a little difficult to find to find stuff every now and then. So yeah, actually, you know what? I'm going to go with a client of mine. Actually reached out, and she was asking about auctions. What's up with auctions? So, and we'll come back here so you don't have to stare at the website there. Also, yeah, you can tell that I was recording some videos early today. Just recorded the stats video. Should be out in a few days for February 2023. So auctions. Looks like we're redlining a little bit. I'll turn that down. There we go. I think that's a little better. I shouldn't be blowing out as much on the audio. Okay. So auctions. Typically, an auction only happens when a house is distressed. So, something foreclosed on, property taxes, HOA foreclosure, condo foreclosure. Sometimes it can be codes compliance if it gets really bad, but usually not. It's usually more of like a property tax thing. Main downside with most auctions, especially courthouse auctions, is you have limited ability to check out the house, especially courthouse stuff. So primarily it's sight unseen. You usually do not have a chance to go into the house to take a look around, get a picture of the condition of the house inside. Sometimes there are some auctions listed on the MLS. If it's like a bank-owned property or something like that, on those that are listed on the MLS, you usually have a chance to go in and look. But so far as purchasing title at the courthouse or purchasing something out of a foreclosure auction, those are almost always sight unseen. The downsides don't end there. You usually have to have cash. It's extremely difficult to finance an auction. Primary reason why is they usually want payment in full within 72 hours. Most loan underwriting takes at least 2 to 3 weeks. Now, I have seen quicker than that because I did, one client of mine, their relative was one of the founders of a major mortgage company that you have heard of. And that was literally the fastest underwriting I had ever seen. It literally was like we were clear to close on the loan before we were through inspection period. It was it was nuts. But yeah, generally speaking, for mere mortals, trying to get a loan underwritten within 72 hours is extraordinarily difficult, basically impossible. So you have to have the cash. One alternative kind of method is you can have a hard money loan, but again, you have to have all that stuff in place ahead of time. You really need that, at least 2 weeks so that you can basically fire everything off. And also the hard money lender is going to have to know, what you're doing so that they will have those funds ready to go. So those are the two main downsides of auctions. So, limited ability to take a look at the house, the structure, make sure it's in a decent condition. You have to have cash. A bit of the unsung part of problematic auctions is that it is deceptive on the courthouse auction website. So most stuff happens on the web now. The days of going down to the steps and, oh, the auctioneer being there, that doesn't happen too much. Most stuff is handled on the web, blind bids and all that stuff. The problem that most people don't realize is that there can be a lot of hidden stuff. So a common misconception is that title for real estate is like title for a car. It is not. So with like a car, the title is literally a document, and it says, this is the owner, this is the bank who's got the loan, and that's it. Very, very, very clear cut. Title in real estate is more of a concept than an actual document. Now, most people do think, hey, what about a deed? Isn't the deed like the title? And the answer is yes, but it's only a piece of title. So the main reason why is because ownership of land is not just one thing. There is a whole, it's called the real estate bundle of rights. And so, for example, owning the property is one thing, but occupancy can be separate from owning the property. That's leasing a property or a leasehold. So that's where someone has the right to occupy the property, but they don't have the right to sell the property. There can also be, the deed can be set up in multiple different ways. So, fee simple with a solitary owner is the simplest way to do it, very clear cut. But you can set up joint tenancy in common. You can have right of survivorship, where like if somebody dies, the property goes somewhere else. You can have lifehold estates, where someone is allowed to live there until they die, and then possession, control of the property then transfers to some other property. Real estate is very complicated on the legal matters. In addition, you can also have, property tax liens, codes compliance liens, and HOA, and that's where things get tricky on the auction. So, because it is entirely possible to purchase a property without clear title. If you have cash, you can purchase a property and take title to that property with your name on it, but still have other liabilities that have to be satisfied. Most common of which is, so let's say like a HOA foreclosure auction. So somebody hasn't been paying their HOA fees. The HOA gets fed up. They're like, enough's enough. They engage their lawyer. They foreclose on the house. It goes up for auction. You buy it for a song. Let's say you buy it for, $150,000 or whatever. However, and the people do have to leave because they don't own the property anymore. So you're like, yep, sorry, you got to go. The problem is just because you now have a certificate of title or certificate of sale that says that you own that property, the mortgage that the previous owner had has not been satisfied, and so it is still in existence. And it has to be taken care of in some way. So technically you can own the property. The previous tenants can be gone. The county can have foreclosed on the the HOA can have foreclosed on the property, force the sale, certificate of title over to you, but there can still be a mortgage for $180,000 that has to be paid. It does not disappear magically. Now, the question is now, obviously, why doesn't that happen all the time? So whenever you go to the MLS or just try to buy a house in a straightforward manner with contracts and title and closings and all that stuff, the title company's primary purpose and the primary purpose of title insurance is to make sure all that stuff, all those potential pitfalls and problems are cleared so that you have a expectation of clear title. That is what title insurance is. It ensures that you have clear title. Reason why it doesn't happen that much is anyone that's getting a loan, the title has to be cleared and you have to have a title insurance. If you have cash, you can skip a bunch of those steps and so you can sign what's called like a hold harmless. And basically what that is you're like, I'm paying with cash. You can kind of do it sometimes on finance deals as well, but you really have to be aware of what you're signing because you can get yourself into a bunch of problems. So basically you just say, hey, I'm buying this with cash. I realize that there's issues here. I hold the title company I hold the title company harmless for this, meaning that you are fully taking on those issues. With the county courthouse, it basically just transfers over to you. It doesn't go through any sort of title check or anything. So you really have to know what you're doing with auctions, and you usually have to have a title company in your corner that's willing to do some preliminary checks and poking around to make sure that you know what's going on. Yeah. So that's the story on auction. So you really have to know. The other downside is there's not really that many of them around anyway, and the reason why there's not so many foreclosures and auctions, bank-owned properties, is because housing prices have gone up so much that as long as you've owned the house for a few years, you can usually sell the property, pay off the mortgage, and put some money in your pocket. I've had 2 or 3 clients that I've helped with that. Like, they're had some life circumstances changed and were stressed out. They thought that they were losing the condo. They've owned this thing for, I don't know, like they'd owned it since the early 90s. And so they had, basically had given up on it. And luckily somebody mentioned it to it. And I was talking to him. I was like, listen, it's like, I know that you've given up on the house. It's like, if you just let me try for like 2 to 3 months, I'm pretty sure that we can sell this, pay off the mortgage, pay off, the condo fees that had been racking up. We could pay all that off. We could pay the fines off for late payments and no payments. We could pay all that off, and you can put like, $40,000 in your pocket. They didn't believe me, and they they adamantly did not. Oh, sorry, adamantly, like I'm talking about an '80s 80s new wave guy. They vehemently did not believe that it was possible. They didn't believe the initial numbers I gave them. They didn't believe that anybody would be interested in this condo because they hadn't touched it in like a year. They didn't believe me when I paid to take the photos. They didn't believe me when we had like 15 showings in the first 3 or 4 days. They didn't believe me when we went under contract. They didn't believe me when we had the payoffs and the estoppels and all that stuff. Finally, from the lawyers and condos and the mortgage companies and all that stuff. And they didn't believe me at the signing table either, because the seller side, they can usually sign a few days early. So I remember he was sitting at the table there, and he's like, I'll believe it when I see it. And this was literally like 2 days before closing. Literally, they're signing the documents with the mobile notary, and he was just like, nope, I'll believe it when I see it. And then 2 days later, when it closed, and I called them and the money was in their bank account, they were like literally in tears. Just so happy that it had worked out that way for them. So I was happy to help them out too. So if you know somebody who's kind of facing foreclosure or some sort of circumstances like that, please reach out for help, because a lot of times there's things that we can do. Even if there's no equity there are still things that we can do to to try to salvage things. A lot of options. All right, let me see if I can find another good question here. Let's see. What's Lakeland like? Well, I lived there for a few years. It's pretty nice. It's definitely come along quite a ways since 1995 through 7 for sure. Let's see current homeowners. Yeah, I feel like homeowners insurance just kind of is what it is. Like there's nothing we can really do to affect homeowners insurance all that much. Let me bounce around here and see if we have some questions, some active questions. Sorry, still. So next week we will get this this technology here figured out. Because I swear I set this up. Yeah. Oh man. See if there's anything in the emails, any text messages of people telling me the stuff's not working. Nope, nothing currently. That's good, I guess. All right, nothing there, nothing there. Okay, let's just keep on rolling then. All right, here we go. Are CDDs bad? Yeah, so CDDs, HOAs, very popular, very popular horses for people to smack down for sure. CDDs are HOAs. Everybody knows. Obviously, HOA is a group of houses, residents that get together. They vote on things. They set rules to manage their neighborhood. Can be large, can be small. There's actually one level above HOA, so far as like more abstract, which is deed restrictions. So there are some neighborhoods that only have deed restrictions that set rules like, you know, no horses in the front yard. Houses have to be like 3,000 square feet, like those sorts of rules. But they usually don't get down in the nitty gritty of, you know, your lawn can't be more than 4 inches or, you know, something ridiculous. So HOAs, obviously, homeowners association, collection of residents, they hold meetings, they vote on things. There's usually a president, treasurer, secretary. HOAs usually provide for maintenance of common areas, sidewalks, roads, and the reason why there's so many HOAs is cities and counties learned that they can hand a lot of that maintenance stuff off to HOAs. So that's why they're so popular. You know, historically, a city would, you know, just kind of grow naturally. But, you know, current trend is to hand that responsibility off to the residents, to greater and lesser effects. Yes, there are horror stories of nightmare HOAs. I actually held a open house in one where the lady literally like kicked the door in on the open house I was holding and started barking commands that I gotta shut it down and all this stuff. All because, surprise, surprise, they apparently had a rule on open houses that, you know, I specifically asked the owner and they didn't have any idea about it. And, you know, the rules weren't online anywhere. So yeah, but this lady got extraordinarily mad that I did not go through the proper channels to set up a open house. Most HOAs are not that bad, by the way. So CDD. So CDD is a community development district. They're a little newer concept than HOAs. HOAs kind of came around the late 70s, 80s when they had their heyday. Still big today also. CDDs, community development district. Best way to think of them is they are usually a collection of HOAs. So an HOA is usually like a smaller, you know, one-off neighborhood built by one builder. A CDD is a major overarching developer comes in, they buy like, you know, 1,000 acres, and they're putting together this big master planned community. And so inside of that community is usually, you will find different housing styles and also different builders. So the overarching plan will be like, okay, so this is where D.R. Horton builds, this is where West Bay is building, this is where, you know, Ryan Homes is building, Miranda's over here, you know, that sort of stuff. So every builder kind of has their own little section on their own HOA. There can also be different housing types, you know, duplexes, townhomes, mixed with single families, etc. So in those, sorry, just make sure that no one's, okay. There we go. Just make sure that it wasn't somebody that couldn't get into the live stream here. So, so the CDD provides more high-level overarching planning and maintenance. So a lot of times CDDs will provide the extensive paths that go all throughout the community. There's usually multiple community centers that the CDD usually handles, although each HOA can have its own like little pool and stuff like that. A lot of the big CDDs will, so like Starkey Ranch, Fishhawk Ranch, up in Wesley Chapel, a lot of those will actually have their own trash collection as well as waste treatment processing. So all of that kind of goes into under the CDD management. And then, so whenever you have a CDD, the HOA is usually pretty low priced monthly or annually. Like a few $100 maybe for the year, up to maybe $1,000. I think Fishhawk's like 1,000, something like that. There's usually MLS fields that show that very clearly. The CDD field is in the MLS, but it doesn't show up on a lot of the public sites for some reason. I don't know why. It's like ZillowRealtor.com. It can be tricky to find the CDD fee. But the HOA fee is paid directly to the HOA. Like I said, they hold meetings. You can go there and vote, and all that stuff. The CDD fee is actually paid usually as part of the property taxes. So if you buy a house in a CDD, you'll have property tax, CDD fee, which gets paid annually, and it can be expensive. They can get up into the multiple thousands. Usually they're, 1,000 to 1,500, but some of the bigger ones with a bunch of features, they can definitely get up there in price. So property taxes and CDD gets paid with property taxes, and then you have your HOA fee that gets paid, separately. Are they bad? Honestly, it's just a personal preference. So if you are the type that are looking for a large master plan community that really enjoys the thought of well-manicured trails, sidewalks everywhere, usually there's traffic calming stuff as well. Sometimes there's gates, but not necessarily. Lots of community centers, parks, recreational activities, manicured avenues and boulevards. Like if all of that stuff speaks to you, then HOAs and CDDs are usually where you will trend to go. Then there's other people that absolutely sounds like the most terrible thing that they could imagine living with. And, that's fine. Both exist. One is not better than the other. So if you're looking for that well-manicured, lifestyle, CDDs and HOAs provide that. Otherwise, there's the more rural or not as rule intensive areas as well. And surprisingly, they're not out in the sticks. Like there's plenty that's close into the city. That's literally like, you can bicycle into the city from these places. So, so the more important part is to be able to fine tune what you're looking for in a house. All right, let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Ooh, wetlands. These are always fun. So, in the state of Florida, I have been getting a lot of questions about vacant land. Let's see how we're still doing here. Yeah. So, apologize. My lavalier wireless thing here I'd noticed that it had been running out of battery, so I like to check it, make sure we're still good on the audio. So Florida, wetlands in particular, vacant lands. So there's a lot of people looking for vacant land, acreage, trying to, do, more of the rural lifestyle. Florida's a little tricky on that because there's a few different types of vacant land. So true raw vacant land is probably the trickiest stuff to try to build on. Primarily because you have to do a full survey and you have to do a wetlands delineation. So what a wetlands delineation is, surveyor comes out, they measure elevations of the various parts of the land. They also look at, flood zone, how the water moves in the area. And they determine if any section of the lot is within a designated wetlands. Now the rule is you really can't touch, change, or build anything in a designated wetlands or within, I think it's usually 25 feet, but that does change in some different types of wetlands. So a lot of the vacant land that you see on the MLS for sale is going to have some major problems. It is not unusual to see like 5 acres of land, but only like a third of an acre is actually buildable. The whole Florida selling swampland to unsuspecting people is not a myth. It actually happens. I need to call them. So I actually saw a I actually saw an advertisement for this back in the that was made back in like the 1910s or something like that, and it was literally marketing to unsuspecting people in Chicago and up north and New York about, buy the Florida dream, dirt cheap, here it is, and like literally the parcels that it was selling in that city were underwater. So it's not a myth, it happens. And there's plenty of those lots still around. Most high and dry lots are either in use as agriculture or, they're being built on by developers. They were pasture land, the developer bought it and has converted it into housing. So it is extremely rare to find a full, free and clear acreage that is, cheap, quote unquote. So if you see something that looks like a good deal, it is almost always in wetlands. So technically with wetlands, there is there is a way to purchase credits somewhere else so that you can modify your land, but it is a process. It is not something that you just call them up and pay them some money and it gets done. And if you buy true rural land, that whole process of wetlands delineation can take like 6 months to a year. Like, it is not quick, especially nowadays. But that is the way to get inexpensive land because none of that work has been done. A lot of vacant lots have had the wetlands delineated, in which case they will usually have a survey that they can provide so you can see where the wetlands line is. Ideally it would be survey with the setbacks indicated. Even better if they're marked at the actual property. And then with that, you can usually just present it to a builder, and they can kind of tell you what they can do with the property. But so that's kind of the basics of wetlands. And honestly, once you start building, or once you buy something and decide to build, it is, again, a very lengthy process. Most clients of mine that are trying to build stuff, it has taken, a year or two to kind of get through all of that, try to get through all of that process. Now, the reason people usually trend towards vacant land like that is because they are, they want that more rural lifestyle. The problem is that at least in Florida, there's no conveniently located, affordable vacant land. Anything that is relatively close to Interstate 75 or Interstate 95 is a little different just because you get in the swamps very quickly over there. But Tampa Bay area, north and south up there, Naples, Venice, all of that stuff. You really don't see a major price drop or even availability of vacant land until you get about 20 to 30 minutes east of interstate there. And we're talking like, 1, 2, 3 acres, which is not a massive amount of land. And then heading north, you kind of have to go to Brooksville until you really start to see some major price drops. Now, there's some vacant land. My personal favorite areas for vacant land is north of Plant City, up along the corridor up to Zephyr Hills, Dade Cities, the Notisassa, obviously. Down south, used to be Parrish, but that's all rapidly changing down there, thanks North River Ranch. There's still some available a little bit further east in locations like Mayaca City, and all that. But yeah, and then some other odds and ends. There's one place down in Lakewood, east of Lakewood Ranch, that you can get like, an acre and a half, two, for a decent price, and that's like 500, 600,000. And then there's a place up north, just south of Sun City Center there, where you can find some pretty interesting 1 or 2 acre parcels. But they're rare. They're definitely the exception. So the answer is, if you're looking for vacant land in Florida, be very mindful of the wetlands. All right, let's see what else we got here. Sorry, just making sure nobody's texting me. Sorry, looking. Let's talk about first-time homebuyers here real quick. So I've had a lot of first-time homebuyers reach out to me, like significantly more than I have ever had in my career. So that's awesome. It is a big, confusing, and a little bit opaque process. So I definitely like first-time homebuyers reaching out very early in the process, so I can help them out, avoid a lot of stumbling blocks, and get them prepped and primed to purchase a house. There's a few misconceptions with first-time homebuyers that I get over and over and over again, so I figured I'd just answer them here. So, a lot of people think that you have to save up 20% to purchase a house. 20% down payment, that's what you hear a lot of. You don't have to save 20. You don't have to save 20%. Very common for buyers to purchase a house with $5,000 to $15,000. Now, there's some downsides with that, primarily mortgage insurance. But if we're comparing mortgage insurance versus renting, buying the house almost always wins. So the other misconception is that to get a low down payment, like to get a 3%, 1%, I've even had some clients with 0%. Those are still out there if you want a 0% down loan. So it's VA loan, and also if you are if you're a dentist or a doctor, you can get 0% down loans. But the common misconception is to get down to 5% you have to do a FHA loan. You do not. There are conventional loans that go down to 3%, 5%, 1%, 0%. The reason that is important is because FHA loans have some additional hurdles that during the contract process that most sellers do not like. So it is nice to have that flexibility to bounce between, you can go FHA if you want, but there's also conventional loans as well. There are also first-time buyer programs out there, down payment assistance. There's also some programs for neighborhood revitalization, stuff like that. Basically the way those down payment assistance, usually what people are asking about. The way those usually work is you almost always have to take a class of some sort on home ownership. Sometimes you can do it online. Historically, they used to be in person, but they've kind of switched more to online training since the pandemic. So you have to pass that class. It is also highly location specific. So each city and county runs their own first-time buyer program. So the amount that they offer varies. Usually it's somewhere between $5,000 to $15,000. It varies depending upon varies depending upon the neighborhood inside of that city as well, because the city is also trying to incentivize revitalization. So, certain neighborhoods that they're trying to encourage redevelopment in, they will usually give a little bit more money versus just a run-of-the-mill neighborhood. It's also usually means tested, meaning that they do check your income and you have to meet some requirement of income. Sometimes you have to be like below the neighborhood income levels. Other times you can go like 122%, 130% of the median income level there. And if this all sounds very complicated, it is. This is also usually separate from your actual lender you're getting the loan for. So this is sort of like an auxiliary. This is like an auxiliary program that kind of gets like tacked on. So if you are wanting to do some first-time buyer down payment assistance, it is critical that you get that sorted out, sooner rather than later. If you need some recommendations on those programs, I do have a list of them. I'm happy to send them over to you. Usually the way they work is they contribute $5,000 to $15,000 typically at the time of closing. So they don't just give you a check or like a big stack of cash. So usually it shows up at closing. It's on the balance sheet there. And the requirement is you almost always have to live there. You can't move, you can't rent the place out or do anything like that. It's solely, these programs are almost entirely for first-time buyers who are planning on living in the property. So you have to live there. You can't move out, you can't rent it. If you move out or rent it, you have to pay it back, usually, immediately. Some of these are just grants where they just give you the money with those stipulations that you have to live there, you have to, you can't rent it out. Some of them are set up like loans that are either minimal payments or payments are deferred. Sometimes the programs will also basically, what's it called? Basically, they will cancel, the loan or the lien after so many years. So like if you live in that house for, let's say 10 years, then they remove the requirement to pay that back. Also, yeah, if you move out, if you sell it, you have to pay that money back. Yeah, but it is an extremely powerful program and great, especially if you're trying to save money up to to hit that down payment threshold, and you're finding just having a difficult time struggling trying to get to that point. Those first time buyer programs can be beneficial. And one more thing, and then we'll close up shop here because we're pretty close to an hour. On the first time buyer programs, a lot of times they are not technically required that this be the first home that you have ever owned. Usually the requirement is you cannot have owned a home within some number of years of now. I think last time I've checked it was like 3 or 4 or 5 years. I think 4 years was the most recent program I looked at. So as long as you haven't owned a house within the last 4 years, let's go with, you would qualify for that first-time buyer program. So that's the first time. So we covered some interesting stuff there. I still don't see any questions. So we're going to send this replay out, to everybody. So give a little recap. Probably also try to chop this up, although I think this recorded somewhere. Again, new technology, who knows. So we talked about capital gains, we talked about wetlands, we talked about auctions, and we talked about first-time buyer programs. So that's a pretty good spread. So anyway, my name is Kyle Sasser. I am the team leader of Ashler Home Team. I am currently active in both Ohio and Florida with KW St. Pete and KW Advisors in Dayton, Ohio. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, feel free to shoot me an email, Kyle@AshlerRE, that's ASHLARRE.com. Going to be doing these relatively frequently. I think my current timing, I think, is going to be 2 weeks. So, but if you have a question and you get it over to me, I promise I will answer it for you before the next before the next one. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.